Okay, so you're probably tuning in today because of the big news about the Waqf Amendment Bill passing after, a long debate in the Lok Sabha.
A full 12 hours.
Yeah, exactly. A solid 12 hours
Right.
they were going at it.
Quite a marathon session.
It is, and we know that a lot of you are looking for, more than just the headlines, right? You want to really get to the bottom of what this bill means, what the changes are, and, what people are saying about it on all sides.
Right, because there's a lot at stake here.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we're really going to unpack all of that. We've been going through a ton of material, including some great reporting from the Hindu.
Yeah, that's been a really helpful resource.
It has. And so our mission today is to really take apart this Waqf Amendment Bill 2025, figure out what's changed from the original 1995 Waqf Act, why it's causing so much debate, and what the potential consequences could be.
Because it's one thing to know it passed, but it's a whole other thing to understand what that actually means in practice, right?
Exactly. So let's get right into it. One of the big things that jumped out at me is this change to judicial oversight. With the old act, it seems like if the Waqf Tribunal made a decision, that was pretty much the end of it.
That's right. They had a lot of final say under the 1995 Act. But with this new amendment, things are a little different. Now there's an option to appeal directly to the High Court.
So it's like adding another layer of checks and balances.
Precisely. It's about strengthening legal accountability, making sure that if someone isn't happy with a tribunal ruling, they have recourse to a higher judicial authority. It's a pretty significant shift in the process.
Definitely. Now, another thing that's been getting a lot of attention is this idea of Waqf by user. And initially, I was a little confused about what that even meant. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure, Waqf by user essentially refers to properties that have been used by the Muslim community as Waqf land for a long time, but maybe don't have all the official paperwork to back it up. Think like a local mosque or a graveyard that's been there forever and everyone knows it's Waqf, but it might not be formally registered.
Right. And there was some worry that this new bill wouldn't recognize those kinds of properties at all.
Yeah, there were definitely some concerns about that. But the good news is the bill, as it's been passed, does offer some protection for these Waqf by user properties as long as they were already officially registered as Waqf before this new law kicks in.
Okay, so already registered. That's key.
Right.
So what about going forward? It seems like it's going to be a lot harder to get something recognized as Waqf by user in the future.
That's right. The bill sets a much higher bar for proof now. For any new claims, you're going to need solid documentary evidence. Or you'll need a formal declaration from a practicing Muslim who's been recognized as such within the community for at least 5 years.
5 years. Wow. So that really changes things.
It does, and it raises some interesting questions about, newer converts to Islam or religious groups that might be less formally organized.
Yeah. How do they fit into this new framework?
Right. It's something to think about because it could potentially impact the recognition of certain properties that have always been considered Waqf based on how the community used them.
Now, this next change seems like a big deal. It's about who gets to decide if a piece of land is actually whacked property or if it belongs to the government. Before, wasn't that almost entirely up to the Waqf Tribunal?
You're right. Under the old act, the tribunal was the main authority for settling those kinds of disputes. But this amendment bill shakes things up. It gives power to senior government officers, anyone ranking above district collector, to also weigh in on these cases.
So basically, a government official could come in and say, hey, we think this land belongs to the government.
Exactly, and that's a pretty significant shift in authority. And here's the kicker. Until that government officer makes a final decision, the disputed property is considered government property.
That sounds like it could lead to some tension.
It definitely has. It's one of the most controversial aspects of this bill.
I can see why. Now let's talk about the digital registration system. That seems like a pretty major move towards modernization.
Absolutely. This new bill mandates the creation of a national online portal where all Waqf properties have to be registered and regularly updated.
It's like taking a giant leap into the digital age for Waqf management.
Exactly. And there's a 6-month deadline to get everything on this portal, although the Waqf Tribunal can grant extensions if needed. The idea is to have a more transparent and organized system, which hopefully will help prevent things like misappropriation and mismanagement of Waqf properties.
Streamlining the whole process in a way.
Right. And then there's the change regarding the Limitation Act and how it applies to reclaiming Waqf land.
This one seems a little complicated. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So before Waqf properties had a special exemption from the regular time limit set by the Limitation Act for reclaiming encroached property.
So they had more leeway.
Exactly. But this amendment removes that special exemption. Now, Waqf land is subject to the same 12-year limitation period as any other property.
So what does that mean in practical terms?
Well, it means that if someone's been encroaching on Waqf land for over 12 years and the Waqf board hasn't done anything about it within that time frame, the encroacher might actually be able to claim legal ownership through adverse possession.
So basically, if you don't act quickly enough, you could lose the property.
That's the concern. And it's another aspect of the bill that has drawn a lot of criticism.
It's definitely a big change. Finally, there are the changes to the makeup of the Waqf boards and tribunals themselves. It seems like they're opening up membership to people outside of the Muslim community.
You're right. The bill allows for the inclusion of non-Muslim members on both the state Waqf boards and the Central Waqf Council, and that includes the CEOs of these organizations. Also, the Waqf tribunals are being restructured. They're going from 2 members to 3, and this new 3-member panel will consist of a district judge, a state government officer at the joint secretary level, and an expert in Muslim law.
So the government's argument is that this will bring in more expertise and make the whole system more inclusive.
That's their stated rationale. But not everyone is convinced that this is a good thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the controversies and criticisms.
Yeah.
This bill has definitely generated a lot of strong reactions. The opposition seems particularly worried about what they see as government overreach.
Absolutely. Critics are saying that giving government officials the power to decide on property disputes basically hands the government a huge amount of control over Waqf land. And they argue that this goes against the whole idea of Waqf, which is land held in trust by the Muslim community for religious and charitable purposes.
So it's seen as undermining the authority of the Waqf boards and going against Islamic law.
Exactly. And it raises serious questions about who really has the power to manage these properties.
And it's not just about land disputes, right? There's also concern about how this impacts the Muslim community's right to govern their own religious affairs.
Right. The government says including non-Muslims is about transparency and expertise. But many within the Muslim community see it as an infringement on their right to manage their religious institutions. They feel like this inclusion is more about politics than genuine improvement.
It's a complex issue with deep historical and constitutional roots.
Definitely. And then there's the whole issue of Waqf by user and the stricter requirements for documentation. People are worried about what this means for those properties that have been managed informally for years. Maybe they don't have all the paperwork in order.
Could this put them at risk?
That's the fear. There's a lot of uncertainty about how these long-standing arrangements will be treated under the new law.
We've also heard about accusations of the government rushing this bill through without proper consultation and even suppressing dissenting voices.
That's right. Several opposition leaders have said the process has been rushed and that their concerns haven't been properly considered. There are even reports that dissent notes written by opposition members of the Joint Committee were left out of the final report.
That doesn't sound very transparent.
It's raised some serious doubts about the legitimacy of the process.
So looking at the big picture, what are some of the potential consequences of all these changes? What are people worried about in terms of the legal and social fallout?
Well, for one thing, it could lead to a surge in legal battles as individuals, and Waqf boards try to navigate these new rules, especially around property disputes and the Limitation Act. And there's concern about potential displacement of communities living on land that might suddenly be classified as government property during a dispute. That could create social unrest, especially in an already sensitive environment.
It's a lot to unpack and a lot to be concerned about.
Absolutely. It's a very complex situation.
So to sum it all up, it seems like there's this fundamental tension at play. The government is pushing for more transparency, accountability, and oversight in Waqf management. But on the other side, you have a lot of people worried that this bill is actually a way to encroach on religious freedoms and the rights of the Muslim community to manage their own affairs.
Exactly. The Waqf Amendment Bill 2025 is a really significant development that's going to have a major impact on how Waqf properties are handled in India. And for our listeners, especially those preparing for the UPSC exams, understanding these different perspectives and the potential long-term consequences is crucial.
This is definitely something to keep a close eye on.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves us with a really important question to consider. How do we strike the right balance between state oversight and religious autonomy when it comes to managing things like Waqf properties? How do we ensure transparency and accountability while also protecting the rights and freedoms of minority communities? It's a tough question, but one that deserves our careful attention.
Absolutely. So if you found this deep dive helpful in breaking down this important topic, and you want to stay informed about other crucial developments like this, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions or thoughts on this issue, please leave a comment below. We're always happy to hear from you. And just a reminder, the information we discussed today is based on reporting from the Hindu Shet. We'll be back soon with more deep dives on important topics, so stay tuned.
Until next time.
Take care.
Bye.